Hey friend, welcome to Grounded, the vestibular podcast. I'm Dr. Madison Oak, aka the Vertigo Doctor. I am the vestibular physical therapist who is here to help you with all things dizziness, imbalance, and vertigo. In this podcast, we explore the fascinating world of vestibular disorders. Come with me as we dive into the journey to discover the mysteries of dizziness, the brain, inner ear, and the balance mechanisms that keep us grounded. Whether you've been managing your dizziness for one day or for 25 years, we are going to get real about what it takes to manage dizziness, handle the anxiety cycle, and thrive, not just survive, with your vestibular disorder. First, I want to remind you that this is never medical advice. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes only and may or may not be the best fit for you and your personal situation. It shall not be construed as medical advice. The information and education provided here is not intended or implied to supplement or replace professional medical treatment, advice, and/or diagnosis. Always check with your own physician, medical professionals, and healthcare team before trying or implementing any information found here. Meet me in your coziest chair while we navigate the highs and lows and the twists and turns of the vestibular universe. Welcome to Grounded. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Grounded. I wanted to introduce myself to you today. And I think this is kind of a fun episode to do because I think it's fun to get to know your host. And this is not the kind of podcast where I'm just going to kind of tell you about myself for 20 minutes about what's been going on this week at the beginning of each podcast. So I figured I might as well dedicate a podcast to it. So my name is Madison Oak. I am a doctor of physical therapy and I am from California originally. Let's go way back to where I'm originally from. I was born in San Francisco, California. I grew up half my life in Oakland, California. A lot of my extended family lives there. And then the second half of my life where I consider becoming a human, because I feel like you're really from where you went to high school for a lot of people, not for everyone, but for me at least. I feel like I'm from San Luis Obispo, California. It's halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles. It's right on the coast. It's a super cute small town. It's not so small anymore. I feel like everyone knows where it is now. But if you don't know where it is, that's okay. It's if you drove literally from San Francisco to Los Angeles and halfway there you had to stop to pee, you'd be in San Luis Obispo. It is where the Madonna Inn is. It is about an hour and a half north of Santa Barbara. If that's the bigger city, you know where that is. And that is where I'm from. I decided in high school, I went to a pretty small high school, that I was going to be a physical therapist. I was probably 15 or 16. I could drive. So I was 16. And I was my mom's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? A normal conversation with my mom. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll be a doctor, probably something medical. I think my mom has always known I was going to do something sciencey. I used to collect rocks when I was really little, put them under my bed in some sort of organization system that to this day we have no idea what it was. But I've always liked weird science things. I always applied for extra science camp that you needed an application to go to because I was such a nerdy child, which I'm really proud of. I'm not ashamed of that at all. I think it rocks. I took an anatomy class where we dissected cow eyeballs in 4th grade and lamb bones and stuff. I've always been this weird sciencey kid. And so it got to high school. We were thinking about me applying for college in the next couple of years. I knew I was going to go to college for sure. I always really liked school. And my mom was like, well, what do you want to be? Kind of what your major is might determine what you might want to do for grad school if you want to go that route, or if you want to go to business school, or if you want to do this or that. And I was like, I don't know, I think I want to do something medically. But the medical system, as most of us know, requires us to spend 15 minutes with patients. And I was like, that is really not going to be my thing. And also, I don't want to spend 12 years in school. And if you are a medical doctor, I love you. You rock. That's great. It just wasn't for me. And so we were kind of talking about physician's assistants, nurses, nurse practitioners, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and kind of what all of those mean. And I had a friend whose mom was a physical therapist, or I guess she's still, I think she's since sold her clinic, but she let me intern with her for the summer. And I had always had a job part-time all through high school my entire life. I've never not had a job. My first job was at a winery in the deli section. I worked at an ice cream shop. I babysat and nannied pretty much full-time in college. I have always had a job. Bartended all through grad school. That one was my favorite. And so she was like, well, your friend's mom has a physical therapy clinic. Why don't you just ask her if you can shadow with her for the summer? So the summer before my junior year, I think I was 16, and I was like, okay, well, I'll drive to her clinic a couple days a week. I think it was twice a week. And I was like, okay, I really like this. I remember treating a lot of like shoulders and hips and knees. And I was like, yeah, orthopedics for sure for me. That's awesome. And I remember seeing she had a neurotherapist there. And that's not something you really think about when you think about physical therapy for most people. And this lady always had no shoes on and she was like rolling around on the floor and her patients were rolling around on the floor. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but that looks kind of fun. But I never really got to do it for a long time. And I went to college at the University of San Francisco. I got into a lot of different schools, which I was feeling really good about and lucky about. And I chose the University of San Francisco because it was right smack dab in the middle of the city of San Francisco, which I love and loved when I was a kid. I was born there and I was like, oh, I'll go back there. And so I went to the University of San Francisco. It was awesome. I graduated. And during my time there, I worked in the athletic training room. I had a full time job as a nanny, which I guess that really is my favorite job, but as a nanny to two kids who lived in San Francisco who rock. And I worked in the athletic training room hours and hours and hours a week. And I worked with these athletes and I loved it. And I was like, I will work in high intensity athletes one day, or I will work in pediatrics. Those are the two things. I had a internship at the Children's Hospital of Oakland. I worked in a Parkinson's clinic at the University of California, San Francisco, so UCSF. It was like in the morning every Tuesday for 4 years, like halfway across the city. So I really had like a bizarre wide breadth of different things that I liked to do. And I applied early decision to the University of Wisconsin in Madison in I guess the first half of my senior year of college, and I got in. I was super excited. And my mom said, I cannot believe you applied to school halfway across the country in Wisconsin. But fun fact, I'm actually named after Madison, Wisconsin. And that is not the reason I decided on that school, but it is an excellent physical therapy school. And I decided I wanted to go there. And when I decide something, there is no stopping me, like I said. So I knew I was going to go to school in NorCal for undergrad. I knew I was going to go to school somewhere massive for grad school. I decided if I was going to do it again, because I went to a really small undergrad, I would go to a really big grad school where I could root for the team forever. So if you are a Badgers fan, go Badgers. And yeah, it was a great experience. And when I was there, I was like, I'm still doing high intensity athletes. And then, well, I don't know, halfway through my first year of PT school, I was like, you know what I love? Inpatient pediatrics. Like neuro for sure is for me. And the cool thing about inpatient pediatric care is it's inpatient rehab. It's hours and hours of therapy every day for like one kid. And I loved it. I thought it was so interesting, so fascinating. It's pretty high paced. I loved it. And I had an internship in PT school, loved it, loved it. And right before that internship, which was at the Children's Hospital of New Orleans, I went to an internship randomly. I wanted to live in Austin, Texas. So I asked my clinical director at the University of Wisconsin, I said, hey, what internships do you have in Texas? We don't get paid for these internships. And so I needed somewhere I could live for free. And Austin was an option for that. We had some family down there. And so I said, they said, this clinic in Austin, Texas, it's 360 balance and hearing. I think it's 360 balance and dizziness now. In Austin, they take kids from our school. And I said, great, I'll go there. Perfect. So I went down there for school and all day, every day for 9 weeks, I saw vestibular disorders. I have treated so much BPPV by the end of it, so much vestibular neuritis by the end of it. And a little bit, they finally let me kind of get into the chronic dizziness part of that. And I said, okay, I kind of like this. I was feeling a little bit new and interesting and kind of like complex and difficult. And I don't really know if I can do it as a new grad, but it is really fascinating to me. And I had some other friends who did a similar internship at the same place and then a similar internship at different places. And we were all kind of talking like, wow, this vestibular thing is pretty cool. And at UW, they do give you a lot more vestibular information than most schools get. So I feel pretty lucky about that. But then I moved to New York City, and a lot of you probably know I used to live in New York City. I've lived all over, which has been really fun. And when I moved to New York, I had my very last internship, and I very strategically planned it that way. I was like, I'm going to live in New York when I graduate from school. So I want my last internship to be there. So my first job can be there maybe. Um, And that was ironically February of 2020. And we know what happened 6 weeks later. There was a pandemic, which we all know. And I had gotten my job probably the last week of February. I was like, okay, I'm going to work at this clinic when this internship ends on the Upper East Side of New York. And if you're looking for an excellent in-person clinic, Equilibrium PT, it's where I used to work. It's great. A little plug for them. I have no affiliation with them anymore, except for I really love the clinic. And that was my first job. And I loved it. And I was doing half orthopedics and half vestibular care. So I was kind of going back and forth between like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But then slowly but surely, as I was getting like my certificate of competency in vestibular rehab, which is like the highest education basically you can have in vestibular, and I was getting more and more into seeing the more chronic patients, and everyone wants to see. Everyone at that clinic was like BPPV and neuritis, like I've got it, no problem. But then they were like, there's these people who are dizzy and they're still dizzy. And we were talking about it in the clinic and we were like, sometimes vestibular rehab makes them worse. Like, what's going on here? And so they're like, you don't have a lot of patients. So the patients we do give you, because remember, this is 2020 in the pandemic on the Upper East Side of New York, which is like where Gossip Girl is from. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's basically all the people there in the pandemic moved to the Hamptons. So they moved down to Long Island. And so this is relevant because I had almost no patients. I was fresh out of school, unemployed in a pandemic. I had a job, but like there were no patients to see basically. And so I would talk to my now fiance about the vestibular system all the time. And he was like, look, you got to do something with this information. Like, I love you. You're great. But this is a lot of information about dizziness to be talking about and do nothing with. Like, you don't have any patients right now. Like, the world is kind of crazy. Maybe this is time to start something. And so he really was helpful and a big part of this process of at the Vertigo Doctor everywhere. And so I started the Vertigo Doctor on Instagram and I just started putting out information, putting out stuff about the vestibular system. And people were like, oh my gosh, I need this. And so that was really, really exciting for me. But I was still working at this clinic, which I loved that job. It was the greatest first job I could have possibly imagined. And at that time, I was like, okay, maybe there is something here. And after about a year and a half of working at that job, me and my now fiance, who no one knows what he looks like on here. No one knows his name. So we just call him D. D and I decided we were going to move to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is where I live now. And during that time, I was like, well, I need to find a new job and I can get a job in a clinic when I move there. But we did a little bit of traveling beforehand. So I was going to get a travel PT job, which is just like a travel nursing job, but for physical therapists, it's mostly like in an inpatient facility or in a skilled nursing home, something like that. And I was trying to get these jobs, but even though they're really desperate for help, they're really hard to get. And so I didn't end up getting one. And the Vertigo Doctor started gaining some traction. And that is how the Vertigo Doctor came to be. And when I was seeing my patients who I adore, mostly with vestibular migraine, because remember, flashback to when I worked in a clinic, which was great. People kept being like, okay, why are these chronically dizzy patients not always getting better? I dove into the research head first. I was like, what is the deal with chronic dizziness? And the most common causes for that are persistent postural perceptual dizziness and vestibular migraine. And I was like, I'm going to become very good at this, hopefully. And so I have read all of the research. I took my time and just like literally printed it out, highlighted it, read it on my computer, read it on my phone, was researching, seeing patients, doing all these things. And I realized that treating these disorders is so much more than vestibular rehab, and that giving information about vestibular migraine, about vestibular disorders, about persistent postural perceptual dizziness, whatever it is, there's just not enough information out there. And it's confusing and there's a lot of medical jargon involved and there's just all this stuff that like doesn't need to be there. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a program that helps people understand what's going on inside of their vestibular system because that's so important. And number two, help people exercise. And that's all it was. Well, first, it was just to help people exercise again. And vestibular group fit is named vestibular group fit because it was named after a group fitness class for vestibular disorders that has grown into what is now my entire life, which is awesome. And it started with a couple of workout classes a week with me and Dr. Jenna Green, who is my counterpart. She has all the same education as me. You will meet her soon. And vestibular group fit started because people needed help returning to exercise when they had a vestibular disorder. And they also kept coming back to the clinic. Some people would say that you can kind of ask vestibular therapists this across the board, like, why do people come back? And a lot of people will say, well, they didn't do their vestibular exercises, or they stopped moving their body, or they did this or they did that. It's not your fault. It's nothing you did. It's living with a chronic vestibular disorder means living with something that is probably going to flare up again, and learning to say, okay, I know that I have this and this is what I do about that. That that is where the beauty comes in, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And so vestibular group fit is what I invented. It's my brainchild of what people with a vestibular disorder need to get to a place where I know this is happening, I understand this is happening, and this is what I do to fix it. And that's such a cool, fun, amazing thing in my mind. And it is my brainchild of all of that into one place for an affordable price, rather than going to the doctor. I know that seeing me for an hour is a couple $100. Seeing one of the top headache specialists usually is a couple $100, or a neurotologist, or can be as expensive as $500-600 an hour. And I was like, that can be really expensive and kind of ridiculous and very inaccessible. And so vestibular group fit is designed to create the most accessible way to see improvements in your vestibular disorder without only needing to see your doctor and kind of doing traditional healthcare, which I am a fan of. I'm a physical therapist. I own a vestibular rehab clinic. I collaborate with medical doctors all the time, but I do know that there's more than one way to do this, and vestibular group fit combines all of those ways to do that, which is really fun. So now we're here. We have vestibular group fit. I live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is fun. We really love to ski, which is why we moved here. We were going to move here from New York City for like 4 months, and we never left. And it's been fantastic. We absolutely love it here. I am now licensed in 6 states, and Dr. Jenna is licensed in 2. So we cover 8 states, which are California, Virginia, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, Wyoming, Wisconsin, Minnesota. And then vestibular group fit, of course, is available internationally across the board. When I am not talking about the vestibular system and it's wintertime, I'm probably skiing. If it's summertime, I am probably on my bike or on a paddleboard, which are my 2 favorite things, or camping with Dee and our dog Hugo, who you will see on my Instagram for sure. He's our pandemic fur baby. And he's about 4 years old now at the time of recording this. So in 2023, he's 4 years old. And he is adorable. He has bright blue eyes. He sort of looks like a pit bull, but like not really. We did the DNA test on him. He is a little bit of everything. Literally, he is like technically mostly pit bull, but he's only like 20% of that. So like less than a quarter of him. Boxer, husky, shepherd, hound, bulldog, which I think is hilarious. That is like a lot of information to have about my dog. But yeah, he's a really big part of my life. Yeah, so I ski, hike, bike, paddleboard, hang out with my dog, go on walks, normal human being things. I'm just a normal human. And I love to talk about the vestibular system. So I hope with this podcast series, Grounded, the vestibular podcast, you will learn so much about your vestibular system, what vestibular disorders are, why they happen, and what to do about them. So we're going to be talking so much more about this now that you know a little bit about me. I would love to hear a little bit about you as well. So go ahead and share that with me either via email. You can put it in Instagram and shoot me a message. You can put it on comments on some of my videos. I would love, love, love to learn about you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm really excited for this podcast. If you would like to find me on Instagram, give me a follow at the Vertigo Doctor and the podcast at grounded.vestibular.pod. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our channel. And if you're interested in working with me, try Vestibular Group Fit, the affordable, comprehensive program that focuses on movement, mindset, support, and education to take you from feeling frustrated and dizzy to feeling in control of your vestibular disorder. Or we can work together one-on-one in California, Virginia, Maryland, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Wyoming, and Wisconsin. Your success story begins today. Dizziness does not have to be forever. Let's get you the right tools to thrive. I love you, and I'll see you next time on Grounded.